Welcome to Navigating Estate Planning with Caress Law, where we deep dive into all things estate planning. I am your host, Tammi Caress, owner and founder of Caress Law, and today we've got a spooky episode for you, perfect for this time of year. We're talking about real-life estate planning horror stories, tales of clients who didn't have their ducks in a row, and the costly, painful consequences their families faced as a result. If you've ever thought, I'll get around to it someday, this episode might just make you rethink that timeline. So sit tight, grab your favorite pumpkin spice beverage, and listen closely. You don't want to end up like the people in these stories. And now it's time for the disclaimer. The information contained in this podcast and associated material is intended to furnish listeners and users with general information on matters that they may find to be of interest. The information in this podcast provided by Caress Law and its agents are for general guidance and is not intended to replace or serve as a substitute for any advisory, tax, estate planning, or other professional or legal advice, consultation, or service. Sometimes we may reference third-party materials or websites. Such links or references are only for the convenience of the listener, user, or browser. Caress Law and its agents do not recommend or endorse the content of third-party information or sites. You should consult with appropriate Caress Law professionals or other professional advisors for advice concerning specific tax, estate planning, or other matters before making any decision. In summary, this podcast is not legal advice. If you need legal advice or before acting or making any decision with anything talked about in the podcast, seek the counsel of an attorney. Thanks so much. Our first story is about the unintended heirs. Let me tell you about a man we will call John. John had worked very hard his entire life. He ended up saving a sizable nest egg for his two children from his first marriage. He always intended for them to inherit his assets. He just didn't get around to creating a will. Unfortunately, John passed away suddenly, and since he had no will, his estate was subject to the intestate laws of his state. Well, John had remarried, and he hadn't really thought about updating his estate plan after his remarriage. Under state law, his second wife was entitled to a significant portion of his estate, leaving far less for his children than John had intended. The result? A very long, drawn-out legal battle between the stepmother and stepchildren. Each side was left feeling hurt and betrayed. The family fell apart, and the estate was decimated by legal fees. This could have been avoided if John had just put into place a simple estate plan. Now, I have talked a lot in my prior podcasts, and I also have some on-demand webinars where we talk about the unintended heirs. In this story, he didn't have a will. That means we have to look at state law to determine who inherits for you. So if you want a choice as to who inherits from you and how they inherit from you, you need to at least have the basic estate plan in place. Otherwise, the state will make those decisions for you. All right, story number 2 is the business that was never passed on. This story really hits home for me as a business owner. So picture this. Sarah owned a thriving small business she had built from the ground up. She was a breadwinner for her family, and she loved what she did. But in the hustle of running the business, she never sat down with an attorney to create a succession plan. When Sarah tragically died in a car accident, her family was left scrambling. They didn't know how to keep the business afloat, and without clear instructions, it was chaos. The company struggled, eventually closing its doors for good. And what was once a source of pride and income became a financial burden for her grieving family. With the proper estate plan and a business succession plan, Sarah's legacy could have been protected and her family could have avoided the financial strain. Again, another story about not having a plan in place. And look, for you business owners out there, I get it. I am one of those business owners who tends to work in the business, helping all my clients. But when it comes to myself, I really had to get a push from my loved ones to get things in order. And it is so important. And I'm so glad I did. And listen, we never expect to die early or die young, but it happens. I, for one, have had 2 parents who have died very young, and it was unexpected. So anything that you can do now to push up that timeline of I'll get to it, highly encourage you to do that. Next, we have the guardianship nightmare. This story is every parent's worst fear. Mike and Linda were young parents with 2 beautiful children. They always talked about what would happen, always said, we'll get a will in place when we're older, thinking they had all the time in the world. Unfortunately, life doesn't always wait. Mike and Linda passed away in a tragic accident. Since they didn't have a plan, including a will that designated guardians for their children, the state had to step in. Their extended family fought over who would take custody of the kids, creating tension and resentment that tore the family apart. Worst of all, the kids were temporarily placed in foster care until the courts could decide who should raise them. All of this could have been avoided if Mike and Linda had just taken the time to put a will in place, naming their preferred guardians for their children. Now, I have resources on this topic because it's a big topic. Each state is different, and each state has its own rules when it comes to guardianship and who can serve and how they determine who would be the guardian. But I guarantee you, if you put your wishes down in your will, that is always going to be looked at very closely as this is who you prefer to take them. And they're just going to be a step above in getting that guardianship if it is written down that their parents have chosen this guardian. So highly recommend parents out there to put a will in place. And we can also put power of attorney documents in place that are specific to children and who will take those children temporarily in situations of incapacity. So we can definitely make a plan. And I don't want anyone to turn out like Mike and Linda, especially when you have the control to be able to do that. The next one is a tax time bomb. This is a financial nightmare that could have easily been avoided. We're going to call this client William. By the way, all of these scenarios, when I talk about a name, it is not the real name. Okay. So I want to just make that clear. It's not a real name that I'm talking about here. But here, okay, the tax time bomb, we're going to talk about William. William had accumulated a lot of wealth during his lifetime. He had multiple properties, investments, a sizable retirement fund. He did all the right things in terms of saving. But William hated dealing with paperwork. I know there's a few of you out there that can relate. So William never met with an estate planning attorney to discuss tax saving strategies. When he passed, his heirs were hit with a massive estate tax bill. The estate had to sell off family properties just to cover the taxes, leaving his children and grandchildren without the family home they'd grown up in. What's worse, much of the wealth he worked so hard to build was eroded by taxes that could have been mitigated with proper planning. By creating a trust or using other tax-saving mechanisms, William's estate could have been preserved for future generations. Okay, This is a story, unfortunately, that I have not only heard once, but multiple times. And it is when I have a client who does come to see me, but they just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to do the paperwork. They don't want to give me the paperwork to be able to advise them. And it's not that they're just not good with paperwork. They don't like it. Well, I'm hoping that the story will encourage those folks out there that can relate to realize it is extremely important. The estate tax, as I've discussed previously multiple times, is a tax that's assessed at death, and it's based on the value of your gross estate. That is your home or the homes that you own, rental properties, your personal property that is inside your home, bank accounts, financial accounts, stocks, bonds, retirement. The list goes on. If you own it, it's an asset. It's included in your gross estate for estate taxes. There is a federal estate tax, but there's also a state level estate tax for many states. And it's different depending on the state that you live in, but it's extremely important because there are things that you can do during your lifetime to minimize those future tax burdens that your heirs will incur if you don't make a plan. Finally, I want to share a story that highlights the importance of healthcare directives. Donna was in her mid-50s when she suffered a severe stroke, leaving her incapacitated. She had always said she wanted her daughter to make medical decisions for her if anything ever happened, but she never put that wish in writing. Without a healthcare directive or durable power of attorney, Donna's family was left in turmoil. Her children disagreed on what medical treatments she should receive, and because there was no legal documentations, the court had to step in. It took months to resolve, during which time Donna's medical care was delayed and her family was consumed with stress. A healthcare directive and a power of attorney would have ensured that Donna's wishes were followed without the need for legal battles or family discord. I have seen this scenario time and time again. If you don't make it clear on first who that person will be to make healthcare decisions for you, your family will, well, I shouldn't say will, but most likely you're setting up your family to argue. You're setting up family discord. Secondly, if you don't talk to those people that you put in charge of your healthcare and you don't write down what your healthcare instructions are, they are often left guessing. Even those that are appointed are left guessing at what you would want. And if you don't have any of it written down, your healthcare instructions or healthcare power of attorney, you can very easily, or your family can very easily end up like Donna's family, where they are fighting on medical treatment. They're fighting on where you will stay if you need 24-hour care, how and who that will be provided. It's terrible. So anything that you can do to make it as clear as possible is the best route to go, and then highly encourage you to put it in legal documentation so it can be enforced if necessary. So there you have it. 5 chilling tales of what can happen when you put off estate planning. These stories aren't meant to scare you, but they do highlight the very real consequences of inaction. Estate planning isn't just for the wealthy or elderly, it's for anyone who cares about protecting their loved ones and ensuring their wishes are followed. If any of these stories struck a chord with you, don't wait. Reach out to an estate planning attorney and take control of your future today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Navigating Estate Planning with Caress Law. If you're enjoying the podcast and finding value in the content we're providing, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment and support us by leaving a 5-star review on Google. This review helps us reach more people who might benefit from the information and insights we share here on the show. Plus, it lets us know what you like and how we can continue to improve. So if you're finding our podcast helpful and informative, please take a moment to give a 5-star review on Google. It only takes a minute, but it makes a huge difference for us. And also, don't forget to leave a comment too. We love hearing from our listeners, and your feedback helps us shape future episodes. So please help us spread the word and get the conversation going. Thank you so much for your support. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends and family. Let's help more people avoid these estate planning nightmares. Until next time, this is Tammi Caress, reminding you that it's never too early to plan for your future.